Welcome to SportsLit. I'm Neil Acharya.
I'm Nate Sager.
And, well, we're glad to have you for episode 2. Thanks for tuning in. And today we have a guest who has written 13 books. His name is Greg Oliver. And 2 of the latest ones out are entitled Father Bauer and The Great Experiment, as well as Gratooney The Loony, The Wild Unpredictable Life of Gilles Gratton. And Gilles Gratton is going to be kind of the focus today when we talk to Greg, because it's his latest book. And, well, Nate, what makes Gilles Gratton so unique? I mean, he only played,
47 NHL games.
47. Why does a player with 47 NHL games under his belt, and I guess, over 150 WHA games, why does he get his own book?
Well, Gilles Gratton became sort of the quintessence of the crazy goalie. I mean, maybe because his career was so short and he did so many things that were kind of just outre and sort of and then he sort of just walked away from hockey. Well, still a relatively young man at the age of 26. So because that sort of fixed the image of him, he believes in, he practiced transcendental meditation. He was sort of ahead of his time with adopting yoga, which every athlete does now. And then there were all these sort of stories, like he had the lion mask, when most goalies just had these sort of primitive painted masks, and he didn't really like playing hockey. This was an age where wasn't this hockey. We didn't have these people who were built to be hockey players from the age of 4 onward. Like he and his brother Norm Gratton, who also played in the NHL, were just kind of like, they just played and they got signed, and the next thing they know, they were playing pro hockey. So Gilles Gratton, to circle back to the main point, because his career was short, but there were so many stories about him, like in ones that he kind of embellished himself, like he believed in parallel lives and past lives, and that kind of got written up. And I think also part of that was like he was coming along at the right time. He was born in 1952, so he's the same age as my parents, but that meant he was exactly 20 years old and coming out of junior hockey with the Oshawa Generals when the World Hockey Association was formed, and suddenly the number of major pro hockey playing positions doubled in size. They needed players, so he ended up playing with the Ottawa franchise that became the Toronto franchise, and he was kind of in the right place for the right time. That was also an era when I think the sports media was really coming into its own. Like all the writers had grown up in the shadow of like Gay Talese, and everyone wanted access. Everyone wanted these magazine profiles, and you had that access. It wasn't like some PR guy. Okay, one question, please. Right. So he got written up a lot in that also, I think, because that was an era of where you had these the Mark Fidriches, the Bill Lees, guys like that. So I mean, he kind of fit into all that, and I mean And so it's always just stayed in people's mind, and then he sort of walked away from hockey. So
faded
that's all
away
people
a little
had.
bit.
Yeah, faded away.
And spent time in India, spent time in a place called Ganesh Puri, learning meditation, also in upstate New York, took up photography, and that's kind of where the idea of the book started. He needed some money. He's 65 now. And not too long ago, him and a friend named Bruce Jessup, who introduced him to photography in Europe, they were kind of traveling around. They got together and finally, with Greg, decided to write this book. And we're going to learn all about why Gratooney was the Loony, or was he? And we'll catch up with Greg next.
Yeah, and Greg, obviously, like you said, 13th book. He's got a long background through his own journalism career, working for Slam Wrestling as an editor, and he's written all these books about, the Canadians in wrestling, and then he sort of spread out into hockey. He's from Kitchener, so hockey hotbed, Kitchener Rangers, and all that. And yeah, it's a really interesting book, and it's a great narrative because he's just kind of because Gilles Gratton kind of goes, well, I kind of screwed the pooch a bit with hockey, but he doesn't also really have any well, what if I'd worked a little harder. It's just sort of the tale of a guy who kind of didn't really like the system, and
he names names. I mean, that's the thing. He says who he doesn't like, and he's not talking about the fourth line left winger. There's a lot of prominent hockey people in here that he didn't like, and he says it. So we'll talk to Greg about how they navigated that as well. So stick around. We're ready to have you for episode 2 of SportsLit. I'm Neil Acharya.
I'm Nate Sager.
And it's another episode of SportsLit. And today, as we mentioned earlier, we're glad to have an author with us today of Gratooney The Loony, Greg Oliver. Greg, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on the show, guys.
Greg, first off, can you just tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, a little bit about your background as an author?
Wow. Where to start?
Yeah, survey question right off the
Exactly.
bat.
I grew up in Kitchener, and I actually got into professional wrestling and did a newsletter when I was 14. And that led to a job at the Kitchener Waterloo Record, which was an overnight job, which you can't really do in high school. But I tried for a year. And then I went to Ryerson for journalism and stepped away from wrestling for a little bit. And then I ended up with a part-time job at the Toronto Sun my first year at school. And so that kept my interest in journalism going. And I got pulled back into professional wrestling with the wrestling boom in like 96. I was one of the day one guys that built the canoe.ca website. So that was awesome because we got to write whatever we want. When I was at the Sun, I did about 13 different jobs, but none of them really was full-time writer. So I got a great experience in all these different things. And then, wrestling boom happens. ECW Press says, hey, you got an idea for a book? Sure, I want to do a book about all the famous Canadian wrestlers. And that seems so long ago. That came out in 2003, the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame, the Canadians. And here I am 13 books later with Gratooney The Loony. It's kind of remarkable how things happen in such a short amount of span of time, really.
Who is Gilles Gratton?
Gilles Gratton, he's a character. And because I dealt with so many pro wrestlers, I think that helped me with this book. But he was a guy whose older brother had made the NHL, and he sort of fell into hockey. He could have been a great goalie, but he just didn't care enough about hockey. He wasn't driven. This was the 1970s. He lucked out in that, he came of age right as the WHA started up. So all of a sudden he had an opportunity to make a lot more money than he normally would have. So he screwed around a lot, messed up. Am I allowed to swear on this show?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
He certainly screwed up his career.
I believe he talks about that in using another word right at the beginning of the book.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, as the guy who wrote it, yes. He definitely, he's a guy who's very honest. He has no filter, so he'll tell you everything he did, from telling off coaches to the sex and the groupies. And looking back on his life now that he's 65, he can have a little bit of regret, a little bit. Like, he can't remember the name of the groupie in Winnipeg that took care of every time he'd go there with the Toronto Toros, and she took care of him for the entire couple of days they'd be there, but he can't remember her name. Never bought her anything, never did anything, but had fun.
But then he can remember kind of really strange things, which we'll get into later, which it's kind of makes him even more unique, because some of the stuff he can recall is unique, but we'll get to that in a second, because I know Nate has a question.
You kind of intuited what I was going to ask about. How much did the wrestling writing background lead you into Gilles Gratton? Because he was kind of like a guy who had a persona. Like, how much? And you sort of mentioned Terry Pluto's Loose Balls being a good I guess source material for it. What else did you really draw upon to try to recreate that, I guess, 1970s do what you feel type vibe that pervades the book?
The Terry Pluto is an amazing book because it was all sort of told that first person style. That's really what we used here. So my editor at ECW Press, Michael Holmes, said, well, go get this book by Johnny Rotten and you'll see what I mean. And the idea was to bring other voices into this narrative, because Gilles' story isn't that long, really. I mean, he's an NHL WHA goalie from 72 to 77. And he never won anything. He never really did anything significant on the ice. So it's all about the off-ice exploits. So by bringing in other voices, like a Terry Pluto did, like they did in this Johnny Rotten book, I think that really helped a lot. And it had other people, because everybody's got a Gilles Gratton story. That's what I found. Not all of them are printable, and I hope I'm not responsible for any divorces after this book's come out, but I've already heard a little bit about it. So.
Well, you talked about weaving in some of the interviews with other people into the narrative, and what I found interesting was you'll see instances of that, but there was guys that actually didn't like him that are woven into this narrative. Like right off the top, I think one of his teammates, and my notes are they're not loading up right now, but one of his teammates in Oshawa is basically like, I didn't care for this guy, and it's in the book.
Yeah, that was Ted McComb, the other goalie, and that led. Well, he was an important guy to talk to because Gilles actually lived with his family. So when Ted went off to university, Gilles is still a underage player for the Oshawa General, so he moved in with the family. And Ted McComb's dad was a really important person in Oshawa sports history. There's a whole sports field named after him. So I didn't expect such negativity, but so what? I mean, you still can include it. I mean, it's not meant to be a tribute to Gilles Gratton. It's a warts and all kind of look, and Gilles will admit his warts first and foremost.
And you talked about it, Nate, wrestling, and I find some of the most interesting sports books are wrestling books because, and you can correct me if I'm wrong because I'm not a wrestling guy, but I find because of like maybe the carny atmosphere that came before wrestling became what it is now, it's just wild. The stories you hear are wild, and I think it ties into what you see with Gilles Gratton as opposed to something like your other book, which is the Father David Bauer book. It's more of a hockey polished book. Like hockey is far more conservative than wrestling. So was there a transition for you that was made easier because you were a guy that wrote wrestling books to write about Gilles, who's had all these wild experiences? I'm
not exactly sure about that. I think it has a lot to do with even the guys today. Like when you're talking to today's wrestlers, or you're talking to today's hockey players, or today's baseball players, they're also media trained. And they don't have the wild lifestyle that these guys in the 70s did. Whether they want to share those stories or not is up to the individual. Daryl Sittler has stories like this. Does he print them in his book? No.
Sure.
But I mean, there's no question that he experienced a lot of these crazy things at the same time, but that's not who we think of Daryl Sittler as. And I'm not saying he's guilty, or I never heard Daryl Sittler stories, but I know they're there. Like there has to be. I mean, it's part and parcel of being a celebrity and being a big name athlete. So I think it, like I said, it comes down to the individual, whether they're willing to share and be honest, and others aren't.
Yeah. How did you and Gilles really, sort of when it's okay, you two are going to be working on a book together? How did you guys sort of connect to get him to? Well, I mean, you say he has no filter, but at the same time, he still has to trust you. How did you guys really connect before you started? Okay, this is how we're gonna format the book.
Well, once we established that we were going to work together, because we had a common friend and Bruce Jessup, who owns a big photography collection and is a photographer in Germany, and Gilles worked for him later. So he's sort of the conduit that made us talk to each other. We did a few, three-way calls between us, and Bruce would prompt him and say, "Oh, tell him this story, tell him this story." Eventually, it came that there was going to be a Toronto Toros Ottawa Nationals reunion in Toronto. So Gilles was coming down in August, and we just figured out this would be the best time to work on it. And so Gilles came and just stayed at my house. Complete stranger staying at your house. And so you sat out in the backyard, or you sat in the living room, and you just talked. And one thing would lead to the other. You'd make notes. Once I went through all that, like that was 2 days worth of stuff. Once you go through that, then you go back to him. And you say, "Hey, we didn't get very much about the Generals. Can you tell me about the first year? What was the coach like? Did you go to high school?" And then you get the story, "Oh yeah, I dropped out after 3 days. My English was so bad I didn't care." But the school never followed up. Things like that are remarkable in this day and age.
Let's just give a little background for some of our listeners that don't know a lot about Gilles. Gilles obviously kind of made the NHL by accident. If you ask him, I had a call with him last night. And we touched on it. You touched on his unconventional lifestyle. This man, obviously he is as far from anything you'll see in hockey right now, or probably ever, as you can get. He's spent time in India. He's a meditator. He's made some, references to having,
past lives,
out of body experiences.
Yeah.
So he got this name, Gratooney The Loony. But I mean, in talking to him last night, he's by no stretch a loony. He's just a guy who has different opinions. He can articulate them. And I just, how did you find? I mean, what did you know about him going in, and then did that change once you started talking to him in your backyard when he came over?
Yeah, well, it was interesting because we did a book. Richard Kempton and I did the "Don't Call Me Goon," where we talked to the goons, and then we did the Goaltenders Union, where we tried to show a picture of how goalies are all similar and yet they're different. And everybody's dream goalie is to talk to is a guy like Gratooney The Loony. And Richard actually talked to him for the book and found him to be exactly as you described. He's a very thoughtful guy, very introspective, doesn't give a lot of thought to today's hockey, and yet he works in the business. He works for Classic Auctions and you know, has access, like Billy, so he tells a story, it's not in the book because it was afterwards, but Billy Smith comes by the office, Hockey Hall of Fame goalie, and Gilles like basically just ignores him. And then later on, somebody, well, did you get to say hi to Billy? And he goes, was that Billy Smith? And then so he runs downstairs to talk with him because here's a guy you played
Right.
against. He should have some sort of camaraderie. But in general, he just doesn't have that kind of thing. But it made him an interesting guy to talk to, for sure.
And I wondered, Greg, how much is the sort of the book a sort of a comment on just what it was like to be a goaltender 40 years ago? Because now, I mean, I could go to like a Ryerson women's hockey game, and the goalies on the ice have had more coaching and instruction than NHL goalies did in Gilles' career. I mean, the equipment was so much heavier. You know, they were all the time sort of almost self-taught. How much is the book sort of a comment on just what a nerve-wracking profession that was in those days?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. There were no goalie coaches, or if they did, they were pretty clueless. Like he talks a lot about the mentoring he got from Dan Bouchard, who was only like a couple years older than him, who was his brother's Norm's age. So they were friends. They all knew each other, and Dan looks out for him throughout his career and tries to help him. So yeah, there's definitely that, but Gilles never pursued it either, right? He never the kind of guy that I want to get better at this. It's always like, man, I don't really want to be here. So it's not the drivenness that you get from, you know, a lot of today's kids that are up and coming, or like I said, university hockey or wherever it is. There's always those mentoring, and now with access to the internet, you can watch videos, you can learn about goaltending, all that stuff. There was Jacques Plante's book on goaltending. That was it. That's the only book that everybody had, Jacques Plante's book. So that's the one they rave about.
Speaking of connecting to the internet, I'm on board now, so I can. And yes, thank you, Nate. That was a great point. His trajectory. He told me basically when he was a young guy, from the time he was 5 or 6, he was like wondering what he was doing in his body. I mean, have you ever encountered anyone like this in all the time you've written 13 books? You've said, right? Is there anyone that's come close to who this guy is?
I had to do a lot of learning myself, right? What does it mean to have a out of body experience? What does it mean? So you're researching things you certainly never did before. Wrestlers, no. I mean, I've written other sports and entertainment things, but usually it's a professional interview, right? You're talking about a project, or you're talking about this. Even the most interesting cats in your life that you've interviewed, a guy like Ralph Bakshi, right? An animator and stuff like that. You do all this research into them, but you don't get into personal stuff the way you do when you're working with somebody in an autobiography.
Was there a sensitivity then? You felt like so I found some of the most poignant parts of the book where at the end he's talking about his parents dying, and then he's talking about seeing his dad in an out-of-body experience, and his dad goes away into a bus-like spaceship. And like, when he's saying that to you, I mean, part of you, I'm sure, and I'm not putting words in your mouth, but you can tell me in a second, might be like, okay, this is unique, but I mean, it's written in such a real way. Like, I mean, it was moving. I mean, was there a weight you carried when he was kind of saying these things that others just to make sure that others didn't see it in a strange way? Or
when you're sitting there listening, you have your doubts, right? But then you go back and you listen to the tapes and you talk to him again about it. Like, he believes, and this is his book, so it should be, in a way, my job is like, so I guess my job is to explain it to somebody so they understand it a little bit more. Like, that there are other people in the world that believe these kind of things. Like, he's not alone in that, and Jill certainly knows that. I'm not sure I got to the point where I ever believed in it, but I certainly know that he believes, and I respect that, and he's entitled to it.
No, and I thought it really came across well at the end, because it's we read a lot of books, sports books, hockey books, and I'm not sure how every author would be able to tackle something like that, because it's not something you're you're going to see in a lot of books. Now, I think in Daryl Sittler released a book last year, like a picture book.
Yep.
And there was a talk of Red Kelly and the Crystals. I mean, that was
Pyramid Power.
Pyramid Power, and this, I think it was in '76. Am I right, Nate? Somewhere around
74, 76ish.
right around there. Red Kelly's daughter, I believe, believed in crystals, and then he brought it in the dressing room. And Daryl Sittler somehow, he at least addressed it.
They all did. Actually, I worked with Red's people on that book, on Red Kelly's autobiography,
Right.
which is awesome. Waxy Gregoire and Dave Dupuy, the guys who wrote it. And I ended up working for ECW Press on that project, editing it. So you had to, I understood the crystal stuff a little bit better and the pyramids and all that. But what's the fun part in the editing process is to be able to go and say, hey, I want to know more about your time as the coach of the Penguins. I think it's underplayed here because there's so much Leaf stuff. Because it's so easy to get, right? That pyramid power, the Leafs made the semifinals that year. Like, it all looked like it was a big deal. So go back and tell me more about, the early days of the Kings. He was the first coach of the LA Kings, things like that. I like the editing process, and that's a big part of what I do with Slam Wrestling, which is the website I've been running for over 20 years now. So I like to mentor writers or work with them and edit, make better product too.
How much fun is it? How much of a, I guess, not so much niche, but how much fun do you like diving into that era of hockey in the 70s? Because obviously the sport was going through almost like this kind of like industrial revolution type thing with the World Hockey Association, so many other forces. Yet, the arrival of European players. How much fun is it to just dive into that world? Because if this thing or that thing had happened, pro hockey could look a lot different today.
It's almost like having your hockey cards come to life, right? I mean, I'm just to the age, like the first hockey I really remember are the Firewagon Canadians of the late 70s. And so, I mean, this stuff with Gilles is just a touch before my time, and yet I had all these hockey cards. I would collect them. I'd try to go back and get them. So you're right. It's bringing another era back to life, and it seems really strange to us now. Like the little bit of preparation they did for the games, the lack of goaltending instruction, how they had to take, commercial flights everywhere. It's a foreign world, really, compared to what an athlete today goes through.
Yeah, Gilles eating his Big Macs before games. So it's like, oh man.
And living at the owner's house.
But that still happened.
Yeah.
Crosby lived with Lemieux, so.
Yeah.
But it's a bigger house, I think.
Yeah, in the bridle path, right? Here in Toronto. He also told me last night that he would. One of the reasons he felt his career went downhill is when Billy Harris left. Or was fired from the Toros.
Or either or. Like,
right,
again, it never really comes up, but Billy Harris his wife had some health issues and things like that, so he was going back and forth to Ottawa. So
that's right. Sorry, my bad. Yeah, not fired, left. And he really liked Billy Harris. He said Billy Harris provided him a father figure, and he would come. And this is tying into what you're talking about, a different era. He would play the piano, and I guess Billy Harris would come and sit down beside him, and he found Billy Harris to be a very calming type guy. And he says he credits that for with Billy going as one of the reasons is he felt his whole career went downhill.
I think that's absolutely true. And so Billy Harris is one of those guys I wish I could have gotten to talk to, because he plays into the Father Bauer thing too, because he was involved, he got his amateur status back and got involved in the international game, and then ended up being involved in the coaching of Canada too later. So he was definitely an instrumental figure in hockey history, not just certainly with Gilles. And Billy Harris's book he did is mainly about his days with the Leafs, not everything else he did.
The listeners out there obviously can tell right now that Greg, he's well read. He knows what he's talking about, and a big reason for that is obviously the Society for International Hockey Research. So you touched on it a bit, but please tell us about that society, how you got involved with it, and how it helps you get involved with all these other books and projects you've been on.
Well, no project you can do on your own, right? There's always going to be other people, whether it's a librarian ordering a book for you, or whether it's somebody reading whatever you wrote down, or whatever it is. It's always a bigger picture. So going from wrestling to hockey was a bit of a leap of faith, but my editor believed in me and encouraged me to try something new, and I'm glad I did. But soon enough, you have to find like-minded people, and that ends up being the Society for International Hockey Research. And there I mean, it's the other authors. I mean, you can sit down with Kevin Shea or Eric Zweig or these guys, and you're going through similar experiences, or they know the right people to call, or then these are the people buying your books. You're getting feedback. It's so awesome that way. I've been able to give back a little bit, so I've started a column on the SEER website. I think it's just seerhockey.org, and it's about hockey books. And so all I'm doing is just interviewing authors, just a little like this.
Oh boy!
but on hockey books. So I mean, you talk to Ken Dryden about his book. You know, ask him one question, 6 minutes later he's done. But lesser guys too, right? Like my next one, the one that's out there now, has Eric Zweig and then Steve Courier, who just did the book on the California Golden Seals. But the next one's going to have like 3 different self-published authors, right? For whatever reason, they went down their own path, and they didn't go with a major publisher. And there's good and bad to that. I mean, the one book I did with my son is called Duck with the Puck, and we self-published it. It's a children's book, yeah. And it was aimed sort of at the 5-year-olds, and we did it ourselves, and I'm glad we did. We're into our 3rd printing, which I have to go pick up this week or next. So
impressive.
Yeah. Say. And did you draw inspiration from Peter Puck on that?
No, well, a little bit. I mean, I remember Peter Puck, and I get to see Brian McFarlane. I mean, again, you kick yourself half the time. You end up at these NHL old timers luncheons or whatever, and you're sitting and I'm talking to Brian McFarlane.
Yeah.
I mean, how awesome is this? I mean, my 8-year-old me still can't believe I get to do some of the things I get to do.
Brian McFarlane, of course, from Hockey Night in Canada fame.
Well, but he's done like 100 books as well.
Yes.
It's like, I can be up there at a meeting and say, hey, look, here's my 13th book. How many are you up to? Oh, I don't know.
Is there, Nate, correct me, is there a Hardy Boys connection there?
Yeah, his dad wrote the Hardy Boys, I believe, right?
Yeah, and even some of the ones that weren't written under the McFarlane name were his dad under a ghostwriter. So.
Go ahead, Nate. Sorry.
Yeah. What's the writing process like for you? Just the day-to-day of it. I mean, you're obviously, you mentioned your son Quinn. You've got to be a supportive partner and everything. You mentioned that in the dedication of the Father Bauer book. Like, what's the process like of just staying on task? I mean, that's what's always dogged me as a writer. It's like I be working instead of on the show with you guys here. But... yeah, I should be locked away in a basement.
You did do some work before you came in today, right?
I did, yeah.
So we're here at the Toronto Public Library Reference Library down at Yonge and Bloor, and yes, Greg was out in the. He was working before. He took the time to work here. So, but
that's a good point, but. I love the luxury of being able to work at home. So I've been a stay-at-home dad since my son was 1. And that's been the main job. So I went from being a stay-at-home dad / writer to being a writer / stay-at-home dad. Now that he doesn't need me, like he's 11 on the 24th of November. So he doesn't need me around all the time. But yet we do these things together. Hey, let's ditch school today. Let's go meet Bobby Orr. Like, teacher's
cool.
jealous. I mean, he's pretty lucky, and I'm extremely lucky to get to do it with him. But yeah, the writing process, there are good days and bad days. That's all I can warn people. If you're trying to do this, there'll be days you can't get anything done. And especially if you're a stay-at-home dad, there's days that life is chaos. Other days, you make your personal choice. I'm going to really work hard. The one thing I've done in my home is I have one computer that's upstairs in my office that isn't online. So when I need to work, I can force myself up there, shut the door, turn on some music, and just write. And that's probably been the most important thing in getting all these books done. And I can almost look at some books and go, I remember working on this one when the Dixie Chicks had their live album come out. And I listened to that one again and again as I worked on Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame, The Heels. It's just weird the way these things happen.
And that computer is it's not just the internet's off on it. It's not even wired in at all.
It's not wired in at all. So it's a bit of a Luddite world, but it works.
No, that's a pro tip, because I think Jonah Carey said something about that. I was like, why is it so hard to get anything done? And someone was kind of like, well, the thing is, my writing machine is also my, movie watching machine, my pornography machine, my banking machine, and so on and so forth.
How many? So on a typical day, and maybe no day is typical, but how many hours are you trying to dedicate a certain amount of hours to just try and get something out? And do you always have a new book on the go?
Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. Up till now, I thought I had a book deal that was in the works, and that sort of fell through, and so now it's making a couple more pitches to whatever's next. ECW Press has been incredibly supportive, but you don't know what the next project is going to be, though we're 98% sure we're going to sort of complete the Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame series that we did. Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame, the storytellers is the plan. So, I mean, you got to have a place to be able to tell the story about the wrestling alligators and wrestling bears and the midgets and a little bit about the women, but also, you know, where did blood come from in pro wrestling? You know, how did the whole carny world of carnival wrestling lead into pro wrestling? And so it's going to be a lot of those kind of things that we didn't tackle in the Canadians, the tag teams, the heels, and the baby faces. Or heroes and icons is what we call it. So you're right, there is no normal day, and some days I get a lot done, some days I don't, but I have a list of things to do that's kind of crucial to my life, and that includes everything from remembering to edit a story for Slam Wrestling to make sure you, like Glenn Anderson finally gave me his address for his Father Bauer book. So, you know, I made a note, I got to write a note to Glenn Anderson so he gets a copy of the book, and I send a little nice note because that's what you're supposed to do. So I need a list of things to do.
Were you at the Hall of Fame yesterday?
No, I didn't go this year. I have been in the past, and even things like I went to the media luncheon one year, thanks to Alan Stitt, who I did 2 books with, who I haven't even mentioned till now.
Okay.
We did 2 document books, and Alan is one of the biggest supporters there is of the Hockey Hall of Fame, and great guy, and has allowed me some fascinating access to all kinds of great old documents and stuff that led you in a whole different way, right? That was a project that came out of the blue, and yet that pays off in any number of ways.
Touching on pays off, and we don't have to get any details, but writers know that money's not, you don't do this for the money. 13 books in, I mean, is it sustainable? Do you have to have a partner working? Yes, you do.
My wife's got a very good job, thank you, Meredith, and that makes it all possible. I mean, especially with the stay-at-home dad thing. I mean, it was never meant to be the main gig. Now that my son's in school all the time, and I'd like to make more money, and there are chances to do that. And like this year was remarkable with having Father Bauer come out in April, and then the Gilles Gratton book coming out in the fall. So 2 books within a year makes it look like I worked really hard, but things get slowed down, right? Like, I mean, they decided to hold the Father Bauer book, which may have been done for weeks. Like, you just don't know. For months. And they just held it till the April instead of putting it out in the fall with everything else. So there is some money out there. Thank God for things like the library program, where you get some money when books get checked out. Payback and things like that. It's important for writers to be supported. Don't steal books. But if you get a book out of the library, if your author is smart, and while it ties into being Canadian too, like, so my co-author Stephen Johnson's American, he can't get into the Canadian authorship program where if somebody takes the book out of the library, he doesn't get a small fraction of a cent. But those things add up too.
Yeah, maybe this is a good time to sort of segue into Father Bauer and the Great Experiment, which again I've came across this spring, and now I mean Neil and I we're Zennials. We're born in the late '70s, so we can remember the Canadian national hockey team. I just wondered, I guess, just sort of how germane do you think is the book and the writing of it, and the fact you talked about this great vision that Father David Bauer had, and how it's sort of, as you say, kind of died on the vine way before its time. How much germane is it to kind of what's going on with Olympic hockey this year with no NHLers in the Olympics?
Well, it is and it isn't. I mean, picking a team, how do you pick the team? That's a big part of what Father Bauer went through time and time again. And with Claire Drake going in the Hockey Hall of Fame yesterday, I mean, he was one of those coaches in the 1980 team. So that's always going to be an element of every Olympic, and that's cool. But now they're professionals, right? You're hunting down, okay, where's this guy playing? Is he going to be allowed to leave the team in France or in the team in Russia for that couple-week period? So it's different in that sense, whereas all the guys back then had to be true amateurs. They were going to university, or they were teachers during the day, and they played hockey for the national team at night. It was a remarkable book, and all those people who gave their lives basically to the Canadian national hockey team program deserve far more praise than they ever get.
Was that sort of the sui generis thing of it? Was just like, this is this great chapter in hockey history, and it's kind of just been forgotten because it doesn't really fit into the present day narrative.
Well, that's a great way. It doesn't fit in because, I mean, today's players are making $1 million out of the gate, and these guys were existing on a teacher's salary and a couple $1,000 and they'd still have to work when they're on the trip. If they go over in Grenoble during the Olympics, they're still doing homework. It's insane, really, if you think about it.
Father David Bauer and Gilles Gratton. Those books come out back to back. And I'm thinking in my head, wow, two people that couldn't even be, they couldn't be farther apart. And then something clicked in. Father David Bauer, a religious man, and you've got Gilles Gratton, who considers himself a seeker. They're both spiritual, and that brought me to this. Which can you read the quote off the top here and the name underneath?
Absolutely. So this is right at the beginning of our book on Gratooney The Loony. It says, "Religion is what prevents humanity from reaching a higher level of consciousness." And we attest this to, credit it to Gilles Guru Das Losang Dawa Jarda Gratton. So
is that Gilles Gratton?
That's Gilles Gratton. So that's where all the extra names she got along the way, right? Whether it was some Swami who told him about it in India, or when he was doing his transcendental meditation or what that. So you're right. He's a very spiritual guy. Different, certainly, than Father David Bauer. But even with Father Bauer, I made sure to include. Well, the guy had vices too.
Yeah, I remember the passage. One guy was like, Father Bauer sneaking cigarettes, coming into his room at night, and he's like, "I know that's you."
Yes, wonderful stories, but I love that process. 100 different people and putting it all together in a piece. Whereas the Gratooney The Loony, you're sitting down with one guy and getting his story and bringing in a few other voices. So they were very different people, but very different projects to work on as well.
Father David Bauer, when I think of him and I think of the book, I just think structure. Like he was a structured man. And one of the themes in Gratooney The Loony is that he's not a structured man. However, he actually he kind of says that he would have benefited from structure had his parents kind of been more disciplinarians. That I found really interesting because he's such a free spirit. You know what I mean? Did you find that interesting at all? That he would, and he even says now with his kids, he's kind of a bit of a disciplinarian.
And it is interesting because he looks back at his lack of discipline as a child, carrying over in the rest of his life, and yet the couple of times where he had a disciplinarian coach or whatever, he completely rebelled and didn't fall in line right. He didn't end up in high school, right? So that whole kind of thing just fell by the wayside. But then it's the professional athlete thing, right? Once you get to the pros, there's certain expectations of what you should be able to do. We shouldn't have to hold your hand every time. We shouldn't have to make you do these things. And so Gilles would have benefited from somebody who knew the game better, say, than when he had John Ferguson, who knew the game but didn't know how to teach the game. Right. So he couldn't help him at all. But then again, it also comes down to that whole thing where nobody knows a goalie but a goalie. So there's never, 8 coaches in history have been goalies in the NHL. I think that was what our number was. Wow. It might be 9 now. It's ridiculous. In the history of the NHL, how few were actually goalies for.
I'm literally
Glenn Hanlon, Patrick Waugh.
Well, Jerry Cheevers coached.
Yeah.
Who do we got? Let's think. Oh, Roger Crozier coached.
Roger Crozier. Yeah, and in some of these cases they weren't necessarily successful, but
Neil Francis is probably the biggest name on. But there aren't very many.
Yeah, that's 5. We got 5 here. Sorry, continue.
That's okay. No. But it's one of those fascinating little facts that we looked into for the goaltenders union. Gilles would not have been a good coach.
No.
But he also brought up something too. Like Gilles, of course, he is fascinated with past lives and parallel lives. How much? But something that maybe you sort of because you sort of had a tight narrative and wanted to stay on it. But he doesn't. How much did Gilles talk about? Well, does he talk all about? Well, if I'd been born in, like, say, 1992 instead of 52, maybe my career would have been different. But I don't really get that point coming across. Is it fair to say that he was just kind of like, this happened and I did, I got regrets, but I own it.
He doesn't give it a lot of thought. That's for sure. Like, he has no what ifs kind of thing. Like, he's not a guy that would dwell on that. What was interesting though was because his nephew. So his sister's son, Frederic Cloutier, ended up on the cusp of the NHL. Like, he's a guy who ended up sitting on the bench and never getting to play in the NHL, but he got there. So, I mean, he was a goaltender as well. So Gilles got to live a little bit vicariously through him and see how the game had changed. And then later Gilles tries his equipment on and
Yeah,
goes
how
to
light
play
it is. And
exactly. How different it would have been for him.
you're talking about different eras. Like, what's crazy about Gilles Gratton's life is that, okay, he has this nephew who's in almost made the NHL, played in an exhibition game, I believe, maybe more than one. He wasn't really driven to play hockey. His brother made the NHL too, and he told me his brother, as a kid, would be out in the backyard playing Robin Hood. I mean, I think till like the ages of like 11, 12. His brother took up hockey super late. I mean, both of them ended up playing in the NHL. I mean, that's got to be from a bygone era. I mean, I just finished reading PK Subban's dad's book, Carl Subban's book, and I mean, and I was reading these back to back, and I was like, again, couldn't be farther apart. Like, they knew from day one. Like, they had him on skates when he was 3.
Yeah.
And so it's just crazy, this guy. And Gilles is 65 now, so you're dealing with probably early 50s, mid 50s in terms of the
Birth year. In terms of birth year?
Yeah, no, when he was 10 or 9 or whatever.
Yeah, early 60s. Yeah.
Early 60s. Sorry, thank you for correcting
But
me.
they also had all those chances to play back then, right? Like, go to the park and be out there all day.
Yeah.
Right? Today's kids, they're playing hockey a lot, but it's all structured. Like, it's a completely different kind of way of learning the sport. But yeah, Carl Subban's book is interesting in its own way, and especially the parenting style and all that kind of thing compared to what Gilles went through, and how Norm went off the rails. I mean, one of the saddest parts of the whole book about Gilles Gratton is his brother Norm. I mean, he played in the NHL. He was on those amazing junior Canadians teams that won Memorial Cups with Gilles Perreault in the late 60s. So he went like 12th overall. Like, today, you think about a 12th overall guy, like, wow, he must be awesome.
Right.
Well, Norm went 12th overall and basically didn't end up having much of a career at all, then drinks himself to death. And it's a really sad part of the story, but it was important to get it in there. And I'm proud of what we did. It's just, it's a real sad tale. That's a sidebar, I guess, in a way, but yet part of who defines how Gilles ended up how he did, because it also, you see in his brother a lot of the parallels to what Gilles went through growing up, and lack of structure and non-parental commitment, I guess.
Right.
It's not that the parents didn't love them.
You're right.
They took them to the hockey games, they did all that stuff. It just, they weren't emotionally invested in everything their kids did.
And his dad was working all the time.
Yeah. No birthday parties. That's the one that comes up, right? They never celebrated each other's birthday.
Yeah, that's wild when you think now.
There's complete industries around birthday parties.
Yeah, now, like, how much, I mean, like, a kid has we have friends who have children now, and it's like your child has a birthday, and there's like a whole like group email that goes into all the parents in that child's class. So,
well, we've been great with my son. He's understood this whole idea. So we usually do a road hockey game, and we just invite everybody, and that's our thing. And all we do, instead of
I want to come to that.
Well, next Friday, instead of presents, we collect donations for Right to Play. So
cool.
That's something that I saw at an event I was at and learned about, and then he bought into it. So. There are ways to get around that whole birthday empire thing too.
Actually, that sort of brings up a question that sort of makes us off menu, but like how much in terms of like the whole, I guess, child sports industry, industrial complex type thing, like how much do you think that maybe that's hurting kids? Because I think back to even my own childhood was kind of idyllic. You played minor hockey and you played ball in the summer, and I mean if there was a chance to play AAA, you did that when you were a little older. But now it's like these kids are so, sequestered into all their little things, and if you feel like it's really hurting the socialization.
Well, my son is just a player. He's never going to be a star. So but what I see is a growing gap every day between him and his friends as far as athletic ability, right? The kids that get pushed up to the next level, he can't keep up with them anymore. Hockey is the perfect example. I mean, if you're skating all the time, you're going to be so much better than a guy who plays, twice a week. So you just see this growing gap, and there's no way really to catch up unless you're. But even the story like Pierre Pilote is another guy who I worked on his book with those guys and edited. He didn't start playing hockey till he was 12. Made the NHL, made the Hockey Hall of Fame. Could that happen today? I don't think so. There's no way to catch up.
Well, just again touching on Carl Subban's book, when you read the story about him teaching night school, and then grabbing PK in his snowsuit and driving him from Rexdale down to City Hall to play for 4 hours, and then he goes to senior kindergarten the next morning in the afternoon. I mean, miles apart.
Yeah. I'm not doing that for my kids.
Well, you got books to write.
Yeah, exactly.
Back to the book. There's two questions I have. I guess I should probably put them in sequential order. So we'll talk about the reason for the book. And Gilles, obviously, he has two kids. He wants to put them through university.
Tell you that too.
So he basically he needed the money, and so he's been with a story like this. For the people listening, you could imagine that people have wanted to know about this guy for a long time, and he doesn't have an interest in telling his story. But explain the three-way relationship between Bruce, you, and him to get this book started. And Bruce Jessup, we're talking about the photographer who Greg talked about earlier.
Yeah, Bruce owns a big photo collection, so we'd use them for both the Don't Call Me Goon and then for the Goaltenders Union. He thought we'd be a good match, and we were. But Bruce had been bugging Gilles forever to share these stories because they were basically buddies, like living together for 3 years when they were in Europe. So you get to Gilles always telling stories, even his buddies at his current job, they've heard all these stories, and so it was a way to finally convince them to collect it and put it down to paper. But you're right, the big reason he wants to do it is not to leave a legacy for his kids, it's to make some money so his kids can leave their own legacy.
Sorry, go ahead.
Now, is there any possibility this book's going to get a translation into French?
I hope so. Yeah, no, like Le Soleil did a big interview with them, things like that. I mean, that's a little bit out of your control, but if you're a French publisher, you're also going to sit here looking at the numbers at the end of the year and say, well, look at how many books sold here. Maybe we should translate this, right? And for next fall. So I hope it does. I mean, it's basically bonus money, but Gilles was never a big star in Quebec, right? If you think about it, I mean, he was in the WHA. They played in the Nordiques a couple of times a year, and then he goes to play in the NHL and he plays against the Habs a few times a year. Like, that's really it. He didn't even play his junior hockey in Quebec, so he's a bit of an anomaly that way.
In that way, and a lot of others.
Ways, yeah.
So you start the book, and it's all. I always find it interesting to see how authors start a sports book when they're focused on a specific athlete, because it's telling. I mean, Mookie Wilson obviously started his book off with the at bat in Game 6, right? In the '86 World Series. Larry Robinson, I think, starts off with the big hit he delivered. In 76?
76.
Was it Dornhoff?
Gary Dornhofer bent the boards.
And in this, we start off.
That was Larry Robinson's second book. Yeah.
Second, yeah, you're right, because he had
Kevin
one.
Shea, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point, because he did release one many years earlier. And this book starts off, and as you mentioned, Gilles didn't exactly have a storied career. He's known for his antics, partying, and all that stuff. But this starts off with his mask, and tell us why his mask is significant, and describe this mask which graces the front cover of your book.
Well, it was probably, so he decided he needed something unique, and he found pictures of tigers that he really liked, and he found a mask maker, Greg Harrison, to color his mask. Up to that point, there'd only been a couple of guys who had masks that were painted. You had Doug Favell had one, Dan Bouchard had one, Jerry Cheevers had the one with just the scars. They were nothing really fancy. They were really simple designs. And so this was the first one that really made an impression. It's a snarling lion, and it ties into him being a Leo and his whole love of astrology and stuff like that. But it came to define him and outlive him in many ways, right? This mask made a huge impact. It was in the Hockey Hall of Fame. Gilles Gratton, as a goaltender, with the quality of his work, will never ever get to the Hockey Hall of Fame. But his mask did for a time.
It was in the Hall of Fame,
and now it's
with a private collector in Florida.
Yeah, we don't know all that story, and it was hard to go into in the book because we don't know all the facts.
Right.
It's not like private collectors come forward and say, yes, I bought this and I shouldn't have.
But what year was that that he that he brought that. That was with the Rangers.
That was
in
with the Rangers, 77, yeah.
So all in all, he played 47 games in the NHL from 75 to 77. He was with St. Louis, which he doesn't speak highly of as a city.
Well, he played 6 games.
6 games there.
How did you get to know it?
Yeah, I know. And then he was in New York. And prior to that, he was in the WHA for 3 seasons, where he played 160 games, and he put up some pretty decent numbers in the WHA. Yeah. But his time in New York is actually some of the funniest things you'll read in this book are from his time in New York, and you know
what it does though? It echoes Sean Avery's book.
Okay.
I don't know if you guys read that yet, but the fact is, in New York, you're a different kind of celebrity. You're both not recognizable by everybody there because there's so many people, but for those people who love you, you're adored. And so the doors that were open to all these things, whether it's a brothel, whether it's going into fancy clubs or whatever, and he even just we talk about it in the book too, like opposing players would come to town and want that connection. I want to go to Club 54, Studio 54. Can you hook me up? And so Rod Gilbert, being the sort of the player in town, he was able to help out all these teammates, and you can see that whole idea of New York City, and Avery goes into that a lot, how he was they loved me in New York because he's just a New York kind of guy. And they're very similar books and yet very different too.
And just leading into my next question, I mean, I've noticed that now that you bring it up in other books too. I mean, Theo Fleury describes New York very vividly in a dark kind of way, but that same idea in his book, Playing with Fire, which was an excellent book. And there was one other book too I was going to bring up, but it just slipped my mind. Regardless, because of these stories, like, he talks about the 1976 Halloween party and stuff like that. He talks about smoking joints with reporters. When you're writing this down, are you like, how did you handle that? Because it must have been easier because he doesn't necessarily care, right?
Well, he told me all the names. My job's taking out the names.
Right.
So it's like, okay, we can't name this person because that's not exactly on the up and up, and we don't need to know who was in that foursome in Winnipeg, though I know, and some story we took out. I mean,
I just remember casually reading, and he's like, something about I smoked joints with Roy McGregor, and I'm like, what?
Roy told me that story. But I mean, those are the remarkable things you get sometimes that just floor you. It's like, oh my God, so here's Roy McGregor writing a blurb for the Father Bauer book, and yet then you follow up later and you Gratooney The Loony, and it's like, we used to smoke dope, and it was really, it wasn't maybe him that came up with them, but the Gratooney The Loony was from Roy McGregor's article. So that's where that all came from.
He was talking about specifically, and I talked to him about it yesterday. Jill smoked marijuana to help him with his with pain relief in the 70s. And now, I mean, we're on the cusp of legalization. I mean, he might have been a little bit of ahead of his time, maybe, perhaps. And do you think do you see any nuggets with Jill where he was kind of ahead of his time? I'm sure there's lots where he wasn't, but
well, that's a good example. I mean, he just overdid it for sure. But I mean, things like the meditation, yoga, all that kind of stuff. I mean, that's almost every team now has a yoga instructor.
Right.
So these guys, you need to be flexible to be able to recover, and especially as a goalie. It really made a lot of sense. He was into some of that stuff. He just wasn't able to commit himself full time to all that stuff, which is what he wanted to do. He wanted to quit with enough money to be able to go travel.
Which he did, and where did he go?
Well, he went to India. He went to an ashram that was in upstate New York. There was another one apparently down in Miami. His life was based around all these kind of experiences. The one person I wish was his ex-wife, whether she would have talked to me, but she declined. And you respect that. But I mean, she was there for all these trips. It would have been really remarkable to have a little bit from her. But you understand that you're not going to get everybody you want on your wish list.
The one thing I kind of took from it too was, the little things I knew about Gilles Gratton were from, I think, Roy McGregor's book a few years ago. He kind of caught up with him. There's a little story about him. I didn't know much about him, but I was like, who is this guy who talks about past lives or whatever? And I thought, when I read the book, I kind of learned more about some of the stuff he said was kind of outlandish, I think, to get at the press and maybe get at his coaches. Like, I don't think he really believed he was stabbed in the Inquisition, or did he? I mean,
he thinks he does, but you're right. Some of the, especially the moons don't align.
Yeah, I'm not going to play in goal tonight because the moon's not aligned with something.
With Jupiter or whatever. So, I mean, that kind of stuff he definitely did to push some buttons and get your coach upset. And the media picked up on that. And it lived on because of things like syndicated cartoons, like the sports cartoons, which you don't see enough anymore, but there used to be ones that would run in your sports section. And you would, the whole past lives thing, it lived on. Like, we found one in one of my son's, kids' books, like it's just, he lived on far more than his career deserved because of some of these quirks, because of some of these crazy things.
That actually brings up, were there any stories that you had to like actually go and find out, disprove? Like, I mean, you always think about all the stories that were, any story about a dumb baseball player was always attributed to like Yogi Berra or whatever. Were there anywhere you had to be like, I heard this, and he was like, no, that didn't happen, or? Well,
there's certainly some clarifications, right? I mean, that whole skating naked thing. I mean, that had grown to the point that, he skated naked at Maple Leaf Gardens in front of everybody. Well, no, that's not the story. He skated naked at practice at George Bell Arena, which is close to where I live.
Coincidence.
So I've been there lots of times, but it was a bet that he made, or a dare, where he got some sticks for the kids in his neighborhood where he was living to play road hockey, right? Some of the old beat up sticks. So the trainer dared him. So it's a story that grew that, you actually tamed it down to put in the book.
Yeah, I swear, I think George Plimpton mentioned that story in Open Net, and then I think Gilles is like, you'd have to be nuts to do that in Maple Leaf Gardens.
Yeah, well, he was nuts, but I'm not sure he was not. But then again, we had a streaker at the Bills game on Sunday, right? So.
Well, he saw the Bills' defense. He knew he wasn't getting tackled.
What do you think? What kind of feedback? First of all, because you were at the Sports Card Expo just this past weekend, what kind of feedback have you gotten? Gilles said it's all been positive. What have you gotten from him?
Yeah, it's been very positive because I think it's just such a different book. It's not somebody holding their cards close to their chest. It's a guy who just spews it all out, and there's good and bad to that. And I don't think everybody seemed to really. Maybe not everybody liked him, but like the players who I talked to, they had a genuine affection for him. Like he was a character. When you look back on your days, whatever it is, right? Whether you worked as Loblaws for 20 years, or whether you worked in a factory, or whether you were a hockey player, there will be characters that will stick with you through the years. And Gilles was certainly one of those, but it was partly because he was a good person. He just lived a wild life.
Is that what came across to you too when you met him? Like that you basically did you discover this for yourself too? I mean, what you'd been hearing from a lot of these.
Yeah, I think I discovered it, but I go in. I'm a pretty positive kind of guy in those regards,
right?
And I believe
you're not
in the
judging.
goodness of people, and I try to live my life like that too, and just be a good person. So it was nice that Gilles and I connected on that, and he's dry. Certainly when you talk to him, he's not exactly someone that's forthcoming with a ton of info, but he'll answer if you ask him. And we became pretty good friends over the years, and I'm glad he's in my life.
Yeah, if you have anything else to add, Nate, I don't know. I mean, I was just going to ask you if there's anything else that you want to add in any upcoming projects you might be working on.
I don't even know what the projects are some of the time. So like the slam wrestling stuff I continue to do. We're doing the book on storytellers. There's a couple other things in the hopper. You never know where the next project's going to come from. It's nice that some of these things have helped me get onto maybe get noticed a little bit more, that this project needs somebody. You're one of 5 that we're considering. So you may not get it, but at least you got to that point. So what's the next one? I don't know, right? I hope it is something interesting.
Is there anyone you can think of in the world of sports that your next project would even be remotely similar to this?
Well, see, Spaceman Bill Lee's already done his book, right? That's what a lot of people have compared this one to.
Okay, yes.
I actually had a thought about that, and then I was kind of like, because they made that Bill Lee biopic that came out last year with Josh Brolin, which was it was so-so. But I was kind of thinking, I was going to ask you about that, and then I was kind of thinking, you know what, they're kind of different because Bill Lee was kind of like, he's never given up the notion that he's a major league pitcher. Like, he's probably, in his 70s now, and probably still thinks he could, go out there and get lefty batters out. And Gilles was kind of the guy who just kind of walked away from hockey. So that to me, they were kind of diametrically opposed.
They brought them together in Montreal recently, right?
Oh my
Bill
goodness.
Lee was in because he played for the Expos, so he was in town for another Expo. And Marc Dudron was the guy doing a sort of a Quebec collectible show, and he brought them together on screen. It's like, very different personalities and yet very similar. So I really don't know what anybody else Sean Avery, like I said, is pretty wacky and his stuff's out there. But again, he grew up in a different era. He's working out all the time. He's doing all these things. So and he has access to money and the ability to do all these things where Gilles didn't.
Gilles is going to be on tour with this mask coming up. Did you hear anything about this? I heard he said something like this. There's going to be replicas of this mask, and they're going to be doing signings.
Oh, well, that's cool. No, I'm more power to him. He did very well in the weekend. I think he sold all but one of his books.
That's right.
At the Expo, and that's what I want to hear because I know I get a few bucks out of that later down the road.
Right.
We're going to the Hockey Historians event in Montreal.
Yes.
In a couple of weeks, but Gilles is going to sell all the books there, so I'm going to come out of this in the hole because I'm going to pay to get to Montreal and stay at a hotel, and Gilles will make all the money. But that's okay. He definitely needs it more. But it's a team effort, right? So
I'll leave you with this. Fill in the blank. Writing. You do it because
I need to. The writing part of it is something I really adore, but it's the thing that people don't understand is the build up to the writing. Like all the research you have to do when you sit down to write, that's pretty easy. It's making yourself transcribe or doing the research and all that kind of stuff. That can be tedious and drives me nuts. But once I've done the interview, writing can be pretty easy.
And that's it. Thanks for joining us today. We really appreciate it, and we'd love to have you on again to talk about more books in the future.
Let's hope there are some more books. But yeah, my gig in general, I get to read a ton of sports books, so I do have a good idea what's going on.
Well, hopefully you'll listen to the SportsLit podcast as well.
Thank you.